Do you want to know the truth about meal prep? It can feel really challenging to get started, overwhelming even, but you're not alone. Welcome to the Meal Prep Perspective. We make foods we love while prioritizing nutrient-dense food choices. We save time, money, and reduce our decision fatigue week after week because we deserve to create a healthy, vibrant life. I'm so happy you're here, whether you're new to my channel or you've been with me for a bit. Welcome.
And with that, let's begin. For breakfast this week, I'm making high protein broccoli breakfast biscuits and pairing that with peanut butter banana overnight oats. Breakfast is always my favorite meal of the day, and I just love starting off the morning with something substantial. So this breakfast was a fun one. I'm leaning heavily into the broccoli and spinach, so these end up bright green and nutrient dense. I begin with adding my dry ingredients, flour, baking soda, and salt into a large bowl, and then take out my frozen broccoli to thaw in the microwave. I love using frozen veggies because they end up being so much less expensive and way less prep work than using fresh veggies. While my broccoli's thawing, I'll add my eggs, cottage cheese, and spinach to a blender cup. While my broccoli's thawing, I'll add my eggs, cottage cheese, and spinach to my blender cup. That'll be a few quick seconds of blending just until the spinach is mostly dissolved, and then I'll pour it into my dry ingredients. To get every last drop of all the egg spinach mixture, I eyeball and add about half a cup of milk, put the lid back on, and swish it around. Into the bowl it goes, and now we're on to the fun stuff. I'm adding shredded Parmesan cheese and some breakfast sausages that I diced. My thawed broccoli is ready to be chopped into smaller pieces, and then I'll add it into the bowl with the rest. I'll stir to combine and add some fresh ground black pepper, one more quick stir, and then it's ready to go into the containers. I'm baking these right into my meal prep containers. I'll link the ones that I love here because they go into the oven, microwave, dishwasher, freezer, fridge, you name it. I'm obsessed. And after spraying each container with some coconut oil, I'll portion these out and into the oven they'll go. Hot tip, easily move the containers using a sheet pan, and now we're on to lunch. I'm making chicken enchilada casserole, and the first step I'll start for this is getting my rinsed rice started in my rice cooker. And next I'll add my chicken breast to boiling water and let those cook all the way through. This is definitely one of those meals that has a few quick hands-off steps to begin with, but I don't have to be actively cooking. And while those work, we're starting dinner. I'm making high protein egg drop soup with crispy tofu. For my tofu today, I'm using firm tofu, and I didn't press it, although you could if you wanted to maximize the crispiness. I just honestly didn't feel like taking that extra step, and it turned out fine. That being said, today I'm using cornstarch to dredge my tofu, and this was the first time I'd used cornstarch like this, so if you have any tips, please leave them in a comment. I'm adding some cayenne pepper to my cornstarch to give this just a little kick, although I definitely could have added more because you probably know we love spicy anything in this house. I decided to cut the tofu into slices, and this was not something that I do very often. I think I usually cut them into cubes, so this was kind of fun and new. And then once they're sliced, I lightly press them into the cayenne cornstarch mix, making sure to shake off all the excess. I continued slicing up and dredging both packages of tofu, and I also added some more cayenne to my cornstarch when I started to make the second package. And honestly, I could have used a third package for my husband and I. I felt like we both would have been even happier with a few more slices of this. But we live and we learn. I then sprayed up all these with a light spritz of olive oil, and into the oven they went. My breakfasts are almost done baking in the oven, and I always set a dry kitchen towel down on the counter, not only to dissipate the heat, but just to make sure there's no water or liquid on the counter by chance. I guess you could say I'm a bit paranoid from the time I set a Pyrex dish down straight out of the oven and didn't know there was water on the counter, and the dish shattered instantly. So I learned my lesson, and I hope you don't have to learn that lesson. So we'll let those cool up in the counter, and in that time my rice was finished cooking, so I'll get that portioned into my containers next. And another hot tip, something I always do when I get my rice out of my rice cooker, is I always run this little spatula along the edge, the outside edge first, and I feel like the rice comes out so much easier. So try that next time you use your rice cooker and you're trying to get the rice out of there. Now that I added my rice in, I'll add salsa onto my next layer, and remember, this is for my baked enchilada casserole, so I kind of am doing it in layers. I'll spread that out into each serving, and then I'm going to add some roasted corn as my next layer, and I'll add that into each container as well. I'm using frozen roasted corn because for the price and saving time and not having to do this myself, you just can't beat it. And I'm not defrosting it before I use it. I'm just going to sprinkle it on top of the rice and salsa and let the oven do the rest of the work. And once the corn's distributed in each container, I'm going to use the remaining spinach from my breakfast and chop it up super fine and sprinkle it on top of the corn. I always love to add colorful ingredients into each meal, and so this is a great way to make sure the rest of the spinach didn't just go to die in the drawer of my fridge. And now I'm adding some shredded cheese onto my next layer, and I'm going to use the Mexican style shredded cheese, so it's got sharp cheddar, Monterey Jack, asadero, and queso blanco cheeses. And since my chicken for my chicken enchiladas is still cooking on the stovetop, I'll jump back to my breakfast meal. My containers have cooled off a lot now, and I'm going to make my peanut butter banana mixture for the second part of my breakfast meal, overnight oats. This one's so simple and goes so quickly into the blender cup, and don't worry, I washed it after I used it for the raw egg mixture earlier. And I definitely could have made this baked oatmeal, but I just felt like making it cold for this one today. And I recently got a lot of questions on a video that's like this about how I eat a meal like this. So normally I eat the cold side, in this case the overnight oats first, and then once I've eaten that, I'll microwave the larger side, so in this case my egg and my broccoli mixture, so I can keep that side hot. Sometimes I'll just eat them both warmed up, and that's not usually my preference, but you do whatever you like. I did keep this meal pretty simple by using bananas, milk, and peanut butter. I blended those in my blender cup, and then I added them into my smaller side of breakfast. And because I almost never ever measure, I ended up eyeballing these, and I needed to make a second batch. I added my oats into the containers and then mixed everything together. Remember to avoid dry overnight oats. Make sure your oats have enough room to swim in the liquid. And now those are done, so I'll jump back to lunch. My husband shredded my chicken off camera, and I'm adding about half of the jar of the enchilada sauce to the chicken directly, and you might need more or less depending on how much chicken you're using, but just make sure your chicken doesn't look dry when you're adding the sauce. The sauce should be well incorporated, and once it is, I'll get it portioned into my containers. Now that this layer's done, we'll move on to our next one. I'm topping each meal with a small tortilla, and then I'll add some more of the remaining enchilada sauce on top. I have to do a little creative puzzle piecing with the tortillas because the ones that I like aren't super large. They're a little bit smaller size of tortilla in general, so I do some creative puzzle piecing to make sure the top layer's nice and covered, and then I'll add the remaining enchilada sauce on top. I'll make sure to spread the sauce into every little corner of the tortilla, and then I'll get them onto my sheet pan and into the oven they'll go to bake. You probably already know my favorite hack is to use the sheet pan to bring all the containers in and out of the oven, but I'll remind you one more time. Those go into the oven and the crispy tofu comes out. I'll give it a flip, spritz a little more olive oil, and then back into the oven they'll go. And now I'm starting the other part of dinner, high protein egg drop soup. I'm using bone broth and chicken stock to make my egg drop soup, and I'm calling this high protein egg drop soup, and it's not only because I'm adding bone broth to my soup. There's a common misconception about bone broth being high in protein, and while it does contain a significant amount of protein, it's important to know that bone broth on its own is not a complete protein source. But Lisa, that's confusing. Yes, it is. Complete protein sources contain all 9 amino acids, and our bodies can't produce these amino acids on our own, which is why we have to eat them because we need them. And bone broth is missing the amino acid tryptophan, so we need to pair it with other foods, and in this case, eggs, to help bolster it nutritionally, to make it that complete protein source. And that's why I'm considering this high protein, because it's getting completed by the eggs that I'm adding in. This topic can feel really confusing, but don't worry, it doesn't have to be that complex. Eating a variety of protein sources makes this something to not worry too much about, and for me, I tend to only think about this when I know I'm going to make a meal that doesn't contain meat as a significant protein source. I'd be happy to talk more about it. If you're interested, let me know in the comments. Okay, so back to what I made. To my chicken broth and stock, I added some water, chicken bouillon seasoning, and also a generous sprinkle of garlic powder. I whisked my eggs and set those aside, and I also knew I wanted to thicken my soup, so I made a quick cornstarch slurry using cornstarch and water, and that thickened my soup, and then I added in some salt as well. I'll stir my salt into my soup, and then my timer for my crispy tofu went off, so I took it out of the oven and it looks fantastic. Now it's time to add my eggs into my soup, and I was so excited for this step. I slowly added in my egg mixture, whisking it as I poured it in. It was really fun to see the familiar ribbons of the egg drops forming in the soup and made me so happy. I have such a fond memory of eating egg drop soup with my grandparents when I was growing up. There were a lot of Chinese restaurants that offered an all-you-can-eat buffet, and my grandfather, having grown up in rural Kentucky and economically disadvantaged, loved a deal, especially when it came to food and making sure his family had enough to eat. So I have lots of memories of my grandparents coming to take us out to eat, and a Chinese buffet and egg drop soup were often a top choice. Anyway, thanks for indulging my walk down memory lane. This soup came together so fast, and now I'm pairing it with, yes, you knew it, another frozen veggie combo that I'll add with my soup. This mixed veggie bag had a sauce packet that I'm not using, but I'll keep in the freezer to add to another meal one day. I went ahead and added these frozen veggies right into the container where I'll ladle the hot soup right on top of them. I also added my crispy tofu to one of the separated compartments, and this dinner is looking great. I'll get this portion into all of the meal prep containers, and there also ended up being some leftover soup, so we'll have that for dinner tonight. And meal prep is almost completely finished. I love when everything comes together here at the end. Yay! And now my baked and layered enchiladas are coming out of the oven. They look so great, and I also forgot to sprinkle the cheese I wanted to put on here, so I added it now. Don't worry, I knew it would melt in the microwave when I reheat them, so not worried about it, but definitely would have been better baked on. Anyway, then I'm on to my final task. I'm gonna sprinkle some furikake on my egg drop soup. I love a garnish, and I also believe it makes meal prep feel a little bit more special, like something you might eat at a great restaurant. Restaurants are always garnishing food, and you have to eat with your eyes first, and there's not room here for boring, ugly meal prep. I kid, but seriously, make meals you love and watch this change your life. Thanks for watching, especially to all of you that let me know the original upload of this video had an error. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you're ready to really dive into meal prep or take your current meal prep to the next level, subscribe to my channel and we'll do this together. Check out my ebook if you aren't sure where to begin, and we'll build the system that works for you. I'll see you next time. Bye!